All right, we're back for our final episode in our investing series. We have covered a lot of ground so far. We're going to try to pull all of this together into a helpful, action-oriented framework that you can use in your own finances today. Now, as with many of the dimensions we've already covered, the most helpful starting point when we think about our investing is to understand the landscape of our own finances.
Yeah, so we've covered 5 categories within 2 buckets. The first bucket is provision capital, which is money that we are saving and investing to be spent on ourselves later. And that money is either shadowed, illuminated, or aligned. And our second bucket is released capital, which we have separated from our provision capital because it is to be used on kingdom impact and not on ourselves. And money that has been released is either committed or activated.
Now, all of the resources that we steward are not necessarily in one of these 5 tiers. Our resources can actually be scattered among all 5, depending on what steps we've taken in the past. To understand our current stewardship landscape, it's helpful to write out these 5 categories: shadowed, illuminated, aligned, committed, and activated, and then systematically go through every account or every other pocket of capital and resources that we steward and control and put them into one of these categories. You may have a brokerage account where you've actually done a little bit of investigation and research. Maybe that's in your illuminated category. You may also have a small 401k from another job, and you're not even sure what investments you have in there. Maybe that's in your shadowed category. You may have a donor advised fund that you've funded with a significant amount of resources in the last few years, but it's mostly committed capital, awaiting deployment. And maybe you have some impact investments within that donor advised fund that you would call activated capital. Any resources that are actively being granted or sent out are also in the activated bucket as well. By writing out every account and asset, you get a much clearer picture of what your current stewardship looks like.
As you plot out your investments and assets across these 5 categories, it may feel like too large of a task to get all of your resources fully aligned or activated. But instead, we'd encourage you to identify one account or one asset where you can take a meaningful step and focus in on that specific transition. Now, in our past 2 episodes, we've covered the 4 transitions. The first being investigation, where capital moves from shadowed to illuminated. So if you find yourself with capital in the shadowed category, a great next step may be using a biblically responsible investing screening tool to illuminate that account, or reach out to a financial advisor who can help walk you through this process. Now, if you have illuminated capital and you'd like to get it aligned, the next step for you is harmonization, where you're using these principles of avoid, embrace, and engage to make some actual changes in your portfolio. Now, once again, an advisor who does this themselves and has the tools to walk clients through it can be incredibly helpful in making this process more simple for you.
Now, if there is provision capital that you want to release and you're trying to navigate what that step might look like for you, some of the actions we talked about are setting a spending finish line or a net worth finish line. But even if you don't have a finish line, you can still identify resources that you don't need for your own provision and then go through the process of moving them to a designated space, whether that's a simple giving account at your bank or a donor advised fund, or for some, maybe a private foundation. This is the process of release. And then finally, for those who have money that is currently parked or invested with a donor advised fund or with a private foundation, your next step may be identifying impact aligned investments that are doing real tangible good for the specific domains or subdomains that God has called you into, or through granting, finding ministry partners and overcoming some of these barriers of perfectionism or procrastination, pride and control. This is the process of activation. Now, there may be many reasonable steps to take. The most important step is doing something. So figure out where God is calling you to take your best next step and move with him in that direction.
This concludes our series on investing. In our next episode, we're going to kick off our final dimension of mobilization.